The 9th of February, 1950, a train slowly rolled from Siberia into Chinese territory. Among the prisoners disembarking at the station was a thin man in a worn-out military uniform. No one on the platform gave him any special ceremony. There were no guards, no entourage, and certainly no shouts of "Long live the Emperor." Few people know that this man once stood at the pinnacle of power in an empire that had existed for nearly 3 centuries. He was once worshipped by millions of people. I once lived in the world's largest palace. He was once called Son of Heaven, the Son of God, but now he is just a prisoner of war. His name was Puyi, the last emperor of China. Puyi's life was like a movie that no one dared to write. He ascended the throne before he could even speak. They lost their entire kingdom before they even knew what power was. To be turned into a puppet in the hands of a foreign power, and finally, learn how to become an ordinary citizen. It's not just the story of one person, it is also the story of the collapse of more than 2,000 years of feudalism in China. Part 1. The 2-year-old child ascends to the throne. Winter of 1908. The atmosphere in the Forbidden City was heavier than ever. In less than 2 days, the two most powerful figures in the Qing dynasty passed away, one after the other. First was Emperor Guangxu. The very next day, the woman who had manipulated the entire court for nearly half a century, Empress Dowager Cixi, also breathed her last. The Qing Empire suddenly fell into a power vacuum. Who will succeed him? The answer astonished the entire court. He is not a grown-up prince. He was not a seasoned prince, but he was a boy who was just over 2 years old. That is Puyi. On the night before the coronation, imperial soldiers entered the residence of Prince Tuan. The sound of horse hooves echoing in the night startled the entire family. Puyi's mother hugged her son tightly. She had a premonition that this separation would change the child's fate forever. According to many accounts, Puyi cried out in anguish when he was being carried in the palanquin. The boy didn't understand why he had to leave his parents. No one explained to the child that, from the moment he stepped through the gates of the Forbidden City, his normal life had ended. The 2nd of December, 1908. Thousands of officials knelt in the Taihor Palace. The bronze bell rang out. The square was filled with the smoke of incense. In the midst of that solemn setting stood a child, barely 1 meter tall. Puyi wore a dragon robe that was too large for his body. The heavy crown made him constantly bow his head. According to many sources, Puyi wept continuously throughout the ceremony. He was fussing, struggling, and calling for his father. His father, Prince Zaifeng, could only stand afar and watch his son, absolutely forbidden from stepping forward to comfort him. From that moment on, Puyi was no longer a son of his family. He has become emperor, the ruler of the world. But ironically, that was also the time when the emperor's power existed almost only in name. In his later memoirs, Puyi wrote that he grew up surrounded by thousands of eunuchs and palace maids. Every time he woke up, dozens of people were waiting to dress him. No one was allowed to look directly into the emperor's face. No one is allowed to talk to them like they would a normal child. If Puyi wanted to eat, the entire imperial kitchen would immediately go into operation. If he gets angry, everyone kneels down. But behind that glamorous facade lies a huge, gilded cage. Throughout his childhood, Puyi had almost no friends. You are not allowed to leave the Forbidden City, not being able to see parents often. You are not allowed to make any decisions on your own. Even laughing, crying, or playing had to follow the court's etiquette. The boy was called Son of Heaven, but he had never lived like a normal human being. And while Puyi was growing up within the red walls of the imperial palace, outside, the entire country of China is bracing for a historic storm. A storm will sweep away the dynasty he has just inherited. 1911. Gunfire erupted across China. The revolutionaries no longer wanted an emperor. They wanted to end more than 2,000 years of feudalism. Meanwhile, inside the Forbidden City, the 3-year-old boy remained completely unaware that the throne I sit on is about to disappear forever. Part 2. The Empire Falls. Early 1911. While Puyi remained within the red walls of the Forbidden City, outside, the Qing Empire was on the verge of collapse. Throughout the provinces, the anti-government movement was spreading. People were dissatisfied with corruption, a weakening economy, and the increasing interference of Western powers. Then, on the 10th of October, 1911, the gunfire of the Wuchang Uprising rang out. Within just a few weeks, a series of provinces successively declared their secession from the Qing dynasty. An empire that once ruled China for nearly 300 years is disintegrating at an unprecedented pace. But, inside the Forbidden City, young Puyi continued to study, practice writing, and play as usual. No one told him that the throne was in jeopardy. 12. 1912. The Qing dynasty officially issued an edict of abdication. The person who signed that document was not Puyi, but Empress Dowager Longyu, who acted as regent on behalf of the young emperor. At that time, Puyi was only 6 years old. A child who didn't even fully understand the meaning of the word emperor has now become the last monarch in Chinese history. According to his later memoirs, Puyi barely realized what had happened. There were no tears. There were no farewell speeches. It's just that the adults around me suddenly changed their attitude. The court sessions disappeared. Royal attire is used less frequently. And the rituals that used to take place every day gradually disappeared. A dynasty that lasted nearly 270 years ended in eerie silence. What is remarkable is that even after abdicating, Puyi did not have to leave the Forbidden City. According to the preferential conditions for the Qing imperial family, the new government allowed him to continue living in the palace. He is still referred to as the emperor. There were still eunuchs attending to him. They still receive a large sum of money from the government. He still wears the imperial robe during many ceremonies. But all of that is just a shadow of the past. Outside the palace gates, China had become a republic. Inside, time seemed to stand still. Puyi grew up in two completely different worlds. On one side is the old court trying to preserve the last remaining rituals. On one side is a country that is changing every day. In the years that followed, Puyi began to realize that his life was different from everyone else's. He had almost no friends. You are not allowed to go outside freely. Even visiting relatives is subject to strict regulations. In his memoir, From Emperor to Citizen, Puyi recounts that many eunuchs often tried to steal valuables from the palace. Some people even took advantage of the emperor's young age to conceal acts of corruption. That was the first time Puyi realized that the power he held was merely nominal. He can order someone to kneel down, but it's impossible to change how the entire rotten system operates. In 1919, a remarkable figure entered Puyi's life. That was Reginald Johnston, an English scholar who was invited to the Forbidden City as a tutor. Johnston quickly realized that his student was very curious about the outside world. He taught Puyi English, Western history, science, and geography. For the first time, the former emperor learned that beyond the red walls, there were cars, trains, telephones, and countries completely different from what he had learned. Johnston also encouraged Puyi to cut his braids, a symbol of the Manchu people. It was a shocking decision, because, in the eyes of many people, a braid is more than just a hairstyle. It is the last symbol of an entire dynasty. From this point on, a new aspiration began to take shape in Puyi's mind. He didn't want to live simply as a dethroned emperor. He wants to regain power. And it was that very desire that would lead him to make the most important decision, and also the biggest mistake, of his life. November 1924. Gunfire has erupted again in Beijing. This time, it's not a revolution. It was actually a coup d'etat, led by General Feng Tuong. The army entered the city. The new government announced the abolition of all privileges of the Qing imperial family. For the first time in over a decade, Puyi was informed that he had to leave the Forbidden City immediately. The man once known as the Son of Heaven is now only allowed to take a small portion of his wealth with him. As the gates of the Forbidden City closed behind him, Puyi turned his head for one last look. He didn't know that would be the last time he left what was once the center of power of the entire empire. As a member of the royal family, the exile of the last emperor officially begins. If you enjoyed the story of Miyamoto Musashi, please visit our channel for more fascinating videos about other mysterious stories. Part 3. The Puppet Emperor. November 1924. When the gates of the Forbidden City closed behind him, Puyi understood that he had nowhere left to return to. The man once called Son of Heaven now lives in exile in his own homeland. Initially, Puyi and his family moved to the Japanese concession area in Tianjin. This place is completely different from the Forbidden City. The royal ceremonies are gone. There are no longer hundreds of eunuchs kneeling in worship every morning. Instead, we see modern streets, cars, telegraphs, and the growing influence of foreign powers. For Puyi, this was the first time he had truly come into contact with the outside world. But it was also in Tianjin that he became the target of a plan that had been prepared for many years. Even after losing the throne, Puyi always harbored a glimmer of hope. He believed that the Qing dynasty would one day be restored. And it was that very hope that made him the perfect target for the Japanese Empire to exploit. Japanese officers and diplomats frequently visited Puyi. They told him the things he had always wanted to hear. He is the legitimate emperor of China. If we cooperate with Japan, the throne will return. That's a very tempting promise. But behind those flowery words lay Japan's expansionist ambitions in northeast China. What they needed was not an emperor. Rather, It was a symbol to legitimize the occupation. In 1931, Japan fabricated the Phoenix Incident, using it as a pretext to invade Manchuria. Just 1 year later, they established a new nation called Manchukuo. It is promoted as an independent country. But in reality, all power rested in the hands of the Japanese military. To convince the world of the legitimacy of Manchukuo, Japan needed someone with Qing dynasty imperial blood. And that person was Puyi. In 1932, he was sent to Changchun and became the head of state. 2 years later, Puyi officially ascended the throne for the second time. After more than 20 years of losing the throne, he once again donned the imperial robes. He sat on the throne again. Then we heard the shouts of "Long live the Emperor." But this time, it's all just a stage. On paper, Puyi was the Emperor of Manchukuo. But in reality, he couldn't decide anything on his own. Each decree had to be approved by Japanese advisors. The daily schedule is arranged by the Japanese. The people they met, the places they went, and even their conversations were all monitored. Even the palace where he lived had Japanese intelligence agents operating regularly. According to many historical documents, Puyi gradually realized that he was merely an actor in a political play. He has a crown, there is a throne, they have uniforms, but they have no power. On one occasion, Puyi proposed replacing some officials in the imperial court. That proposal was immediately rejected by the Japanese side. At that very moment, he understood that he was not the one to rule. He was merely a symbol, erected to serve the interests of others. If the Forbidden City was Puyi's first gilded cage, then Manchukuo was the second cage. The only difference is that this time, the key holders are no longer the Qing dynasty officials. It was the Japanese army. Puyi lived in a state of suspicion. He began to lose faith in the people around him. I constantly fear being poisoned or assassinated. He changed the waiters constantly, inspect the food several times before serving, and they became increasingly isolated. Those who once dreamed of restoring the Qing dynasty now realize their dream has turned into a trap. But right now, it's too late to turn back. August 1945. The two atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, respectively. The Soviet Union declared war on Japan and quickly advanced into Manchuria. The Japanese Empire collapsed in just a few days. Puyi understood that his second reign was also coming to an end. He was preparing to board a plane to flee to Japan. But it never took off. The Soviet army has appeared. The last emperor of China was captured. This time, he is no longer the emperor. He is no longer the head of state. He became a prisoner of war. And the road ahead will be even more challenging than anything he has ever experienced. Part 4. From Emperor to Ordinary Citizen. August 1945. When Puyi was captured by the Soviet Red Army at Mudanjiang Airport, he understood that his life had entered a completely new chapter. For the first time since ascending the throne at the age of 2, he no longer has any titles. The throne is gone. The palace is gone. The bodyguard unit is gone. All that remained was a small suitcase and a fear of the future. After his arrest, Puyi was taken to the Soviet Union. He spent many years in detention camps for prisoners of war. Contrary to his fears, life here was not one of torture or execution. Instead, he was interrogated, monitored, and kept on hold. During this time, Puyi became a key witness at the Far Eastern International Military Tribunal in Tokyo. He testified about Japan's role in the founding of Manchukuo and admitted that he had no real power. Those testimonies helped the world better understand how Japan used him as a political symbol. But for Puyi, what worried him most was a different question altogether. If I have to return to China, what awaits me? He believed he was going to be executed. After all, he was once the emperor of a government established by Japan. In 1950, the Soviet Union returned Puyi to the People's Republic of China. Just as he feared, he was not free. But instead of being taken to the execution grounds, Puyi was transferred to the Fushun War Crimes Management Center. This is a place dedicated to individuals who collaborated with Japan during the war. The next 10 years were a period that completely transformed him as a person. He once had hundreds of female attendants serving him. Now I have to fold the blanket myself. Do your own laundry. Sweep the room yourself. Please queue up to receive your meal. Initially, he knew almost nothing. There was a time when Puyi didn't even know how to tie his shoelaces. I don't know how to cut my own hair. I don't know how to wash a shirt. Things that any ordinary person can do. This was something completely unfamiliar to the former emperor. But as the days went by, he began to study, learning through work, learn to live with others, and most importantly, learn to look back at your own life. During his time in re-education camp, Puyi wrote numerous self-criticism reports, read books, and attended political study sessions. According to many accounts, He gradually admitted that his entire life had been swept along by the currents of history and that he had made many wrong choices. In 1959, after nearly a decade of re-education, Puyi was granted amnesty. He walked out of the prison, no longer a prisoner. But he is no longer the emperor either. For the first time in his life, Puyi became an ordinary citizen. He was assigned to work at the Beijing Botanical Garden. The daily work is very simple. Water the plants, prune the branches, take care of the flowers. Few could imagine that the person holding those pruning shears. He was once the leader of the largest empire in Asia. Later, Puyi also worked as an editor and devoted much of his time to writing memoirs. The memoir, titled From Emperor to Citizen, not only recounts his life but also offers a self-reflection on an era that has come to an end. There is a story that is often mentioned when discussing the final years of Puyi's life. One day, he returned to the Forbidden City, but this time, not in imperial robes, not on a dragon palanquin, but as a tourist. He bought an entrance ticket like everyone else. Walk slowly through the stadiums where I grew up. Look at the red walls, faded with time. According to some anecdotes, upon approaching the throne in the Hall of Supreme Harmony, Puyi said to his guide, "If you'll allow me, I know there's a cricket I used to hide here when I was a child." The instructor just smiled. But when Puyi bent down to look through an old wooden crack, he actually managed to pull out a small box. This story appears in many books and films about Puyi's life, although some details remain debated. Nevertheless, it has become symbolic of a profound truth. A person's memory can endure for a very long time, even after an entire empire has vanished. In 1967, Puyi died in Beijing from complications of cancer and other health problems. He passed away at the age of 61. The funeral was simple. There are no bronze bells. There was no royal ceremony. There were no civil or military officials present. The man once called the Son of Heaven passed away as an ordinary citizen. That was an outcome he probably never imagined himself as a 2-year-old boy sitting on the throne. History often remembers emperors through their victories, conquests, or major reforms. But Puyi is remembered for something entirely different. He was a witness to the end of more than 2,000 years of Chinese monarchy. He once stood at the pinnacle of power. Then it became a political symbol. Next came the prisoners of war. And finally, as an ordinary worker, perhaps no emperor in world history has ever held so many different identities. Puyi's life is not just the story of one man's fate. It also reflects the dramatic changes of an entire era, where thrones, power, and glory ultimately could not resist the wheels of history.